Good day. Welcome to the American Security Council Foundation Peace Through Strength podcast series. I'm Laurence, Sanford, Senior Analyst with the American Security Council, and I'm delighted to have with me today Colonel Ken Boll, retired U.S. Army intelligence officer, and who's going to talk about intelligence and some of the good and bad aspects of intelligence within the military and intelligence within the U.S. community, period. So, Ken, welcome.
Well, thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why don't we start off with basically what is intelligence and how does it affect policy making within the U.S. government?
Well, that's a wonderful question. Intelligence is usable information that's given to a commander so that he can make good decisions. And the way that we do this in the United States of America is we have an intelligence community. And we have, the intelligence community accepts broad direction and turns it into usable intelligence. And that's kind of my central point today. I have 2 points that I always think of when I'm thinking about how we're doing intelligence in the United States. The first point is our mantra used to be, at least in Army intelligence, intelligence is for the commander. It's not for just doing the sake of intelligence, just for the sake of doing things. You have to understand what the commander needs in order to make useful decisions. And if it doesn't match that criteria, you don't do it. Yes, sir.
It's but on the basis that we are at war, right? We're not collecting intelligence for the sake of intelligence.
Very, very true. I remember when I was a military intelligence battalion commander, that some of my soldiers, my intelligence analysts and my intelligence collectors, were basically doing real-world missions. We had workstations in our garrison that matched the exact same workstations we had in our tactical vehicles for when we drove out and went to war. And those soldiers were taking directives for looking at things, potential adversaries, events, and they had the ability to reach out through modern communications throughout the world and collect information that they needed to collect. And we were doing this on a 24/7 basis.
Now, there's a difference between tactical intelligence and strategic intelligence, though. Yes, no?
Yes, organizationally, yes. In terms of the philosophy of it, no. Intelligence is for the commander. Now, when I would read, for example, CIA directive, IC, Intelligence Community Directive, talking about customers, you're working for customers, I think right then and there you have a disconnect in that you only have one customer if you're in the executive branch working intelligence, and they all are. And that's the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces, the United States President. And so he can direct that other people get intelligence. But basically, if it's not something that's going to help executive agents make good decisions, it's useless. And you're building databases. Because my second main point is what happens in the absence of a strong command directive. The intelligence community will focus on process. And we've talked about this before, I think, in that I have examples of what happens when you lose focus on what you're doing. And I had 2 primary examples that I will talk to. I have a whole series of talks that I give on famous intelligence failures, and sometimes I put quotation marks around the word failures. Well, I bring up the Yugoslavia campaign, which at the time was called Operation Noble Anvil.
And the year was?
I don't remember if anybody actually ever remembers the main event. 1999.
The president then was Clinton.
Yes. About a million years ago. The problem was that there was Kosovo province in Yugoslavia, and the Yugoslav government was getting ready to implode, fall apart into its various sectarian divisions. And there was great concern that the province of Kosovo, which was historically a Serbian province, had been inundated by ethnic Albanians.
Muslims.
Majority. In many cases, yeah. About 500,000 of them. And so there was a process underway by the Yugoslav government to displace the ethnic Albanians, get them out of Kosovo.
Send them back to Albania.
Or any place.
Any place but
Any place but Kosovo.
Yeah.
Well, That was described then, and primarily in the European press, as being ethnic cleansing. And there's a certain justification for that, because it was based on the ethnicity, and we want to get you out of our area. So they were busy doing this, and the United Nations was offered the opportunity to do something about it at the time, and they passed. So it wound up being a NATO operation, and the NATO operation was pushed primarily by the European powers, and it was called, our particular U.S. operation was called Operation Noble Anvil. And during Noble Anvil, we struck from the air primarily a whole bunch of Yugoslav military targets.
Serbian.
Yugoslav military.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had it been broken up formally so that
no,
it was still Yugoslavia?
Yeah, they were still in the process of fragmenting.
Okay.
But and this was one of the main reasons why the fragmentation just kept on going. Well, so we hit about 900 targets, flew about 9,000 air sorties, and we were making a very good stab at fulfilling the mission that the President of the United States had set forth. It was basically punish the Yugoslav military until such time as they stopped trying to forcibly displace people out of Kosovo. All those targets were generated by Department of Defense based upon collection, military intelligence information about what targets to strike. There was only one target where the target folder came from outside of the Department of Defense, and that was from the CIA. And it was a target that was labeled as the Federal Directorate of Supply and Procurement. And from the military standpoint, the big question was, why are we blowing this thing up? It's a building in a commercial district right in downtown Belgrade. Why are we blowing this up? Well, it had been vetted, we were told, at the highest levels of the National Command Authority. So the military didn't have it as a target, but the military was given the mission to do it. So we flew a B-2 bomber, and I find it's interesting because this is 1999. I'm going to be talking about B-2 bombers and Tomahawk missiles. Well, we just did B-2 bombers and Tomahawk missiles in Iraq, so it's still a capability.
In Iran.
Yeah, and the same thing, Iran, I beg your pardon. It's still a capability now. Well, so the B-2 bomber flew. They fired 5 joint direct attack munitions, which for us Army guys is big bombs with little steerable fins on them, and totally devastated this target. And did precisely the effect, hit precisely the building at precisely the coordinates in the target package. But when the dawn broke over Belgrade, it turned out it was not the Federal Directorate of Supply and Procurement. It was the Chinese embassy, the PRC embassy to the Yugoslav government. So we killed some Chinese nationals. And our information operations, which had been going nicely, the normal people who were, screaming, kill all the imperialist Americans, they were reasonably silent. The Europeans were supporting everything we were doing. We were getting reasonably good press. We were achieving our objectives. But that all got derailed by blowing up the Chinese embassy. You can't claim we're doing this as a precise operation for precise reasons when you're blowing up the Chinese embassy at the same time. Well, why did that happen? Let me talk about one other thing before I talk about why it happened.
Okay.
Now, a year earlier, we were doing the same thing. Some U.S. embassies in East Africa had been attacked by al-Qaeda-associated terrorist groups, and the United States decided we were going to respond. So we launched a whole bunch of Tomahawk missiles, and we blew up al-Qaeda training camps in the area of coast Afghanistan. That was called Operation Infinite Reach. Well, I remember all those targets very well. We were confident that we knew that they were al-Qaeda terrorist training camps. We were confident that we knew exactly what we were going to do to them. And we got a very good battle damage assessment out of it because the only hospital in the area was right across the border to Pakistan. And that's where all the casualties went. So the open press in Pakistan had all kinds of information on that. We were very confident about this. But then another target folder came in from CIA to blow up a pharmaceutical plant in Khartoum, Sudan, because it was an al-Qaeda weapons of mass destruction production facility. And again, it was kind of, what does that, we don't know anything about that. What makes us confident that we were supposed to blow this up. So we blew it up, launching Tomahawk missiles from U.S. Navy destroyers.
Did anybody ask the CIA what the intel was, and they said you don't have a need to know?
Well, yeah.
Basically.
Well, I'll talk in some great detail about Belgrade, but basically the same sort of thing. Now, I know a lot about this because there was a whole lot of congressional testimony. And there was a whole lot of testimony in a court trial where the guy who owned the pharmaceutical plant sued the United States government saying, you blew up my plant. You killed my night watchman. And why? Why did you do this?
It's not funny. I know.
No, it's not. And of course, it went into the U.S. court system, and it was his request for remuneration was denied. And then on appeal, it was denied. But it all came out, and the judges all basically said, well, yeah, you've got a good case. When we got into the intelligence community and asked them what the rationale was, it was, well, first it was forensic accounting. Osama bin Laden owns this place. Well, he didn't. And secondly, it was, there was an agent who wasn't an Egyptian intelligence agent, but he sold a soil sample to the intelligence people in Egypt. And they did an analysis of the soil, which wasn't actually from the pharmaceutical plant, because he couldn't get into it because of the big walls and the towers with the guards and the spotlights and all this. And it showed that it was a precursor chemical in there, that there's only one purpose in the world for it, and that's to produce VX, nerve agent gas. Okay. Well, none of that had anything to do with the pharmaceutical plant, but we blew it up. But the court said, well, you have a very good case, but your case is non-justiciable. Non-justiciable, I learned a new word, because the federal courts are not in the business of deciding what the President of the United States is going to do in executive action, in national security actions, external to the United States. Yeah. So you got a great case, but
sorry.
So Belgrade, going back to that, there was extensive review. Congress did an extensive review, and they had testimony from the director of the CIA, and they had testimony from the deputy SecDef, Secretary of Defense. And they came up with 3 basic failures for this CIA targeting. The first basic failure was the technique to locate the intended target was flawed. They decided they wanted to blow up the FDSP, but they didn't know where it was. They had a street address. But the maps they had didn't have street addresses on them. So they found a parallel street a little bit over that had street addresses. So they figured, okay, it's a parallel to the street, so if it's, this address here on this street, it's got to be that address on the other street. So they blew it up. That was an error. And the congressmen were fairly abrupt with the CIA director for, you mean the CIA did not know where all the embassies were in Belgrade? Well, yeah, some people knew, but not the people doing the targeting. So the second basic failure was none of the intelligence databases used to validate targets contained the correct location of the Chinese embassy, because the Chinese embassy wasn't a target to be blown up, right?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
That's logical.
Okay,
right?
that makes a lot of sense. The quote is, some of our employees knew the location of the Chinese embassy, but keep in mind that we were not looking for it. All right. And database production is widely viewed as low visibility, unrewarding, and underappreciated. It's underappreciated because we're collecting on things that the president isn't interested in knowing about, or the military commander isn't interested in knowing about, or can't use even if we get it. Leadership attention is infrequent, episodic, and essentially reactive. Yeah, something gets screwed up, then you get leadership attention. Surprise. Satellite imagery of the target provided no indications that the building was an embassy. No flags, no seals, no clear marking. No guy with a sign standing there holding it up to the sky saying, I are the Chi-Com embassy. That guy wasn't there with his sign that day when they took the picture. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Go on Google Maps if you're interested. Look up, let's see, what's the address? 2650 Wisconsin in Washington, D.C. And you'll see a great big building without any signs or anything. That's the Russian embassy. Oh. But if you looked at a picture of it, you'd see a roof.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, the third basic failure, the target review process didn't identify the first two mistakes. Well, it was reviewed by a 2-star Major General who was the CIA Associate Deputy Director of Central Intelligence for Military Support. Reviewers at European Command, the Military Command, and the Joint Staff of the military assumed the CIA nomination was backed by intelligence not known to DOD, now Department of War. Location was not on the no-strike list. Sure. Okay. And a CIA analyst told, now this was a working level conversation. So you've got a hierarchy. You've got the guy in CIA. And then you've got CIA headquarters. And then you've got, if you want it, CIA wants to talk to the military, they go to the Joint Staff. And the Joint Staff wants to talk to the guys who are blowing things up. They go to European Command. And then European Command goes to the Joint Task Force, which is in charge of blowing things up. Well, the CIA guy called direct from his desk across to the Joint Task Force guy. And I've been a Joint Task Force guy in similar circumstances, so I can pretty much reconstruct how the conversation would have gone. This was, in testimony, this was stated as there was no information that the target location was the Chinese embassy, only that it was perhaps the wrong building. Now, probably, if I'm the JTF targeteer, or the guy doing this, that's going to be enough to tell me, maybe I don't want to blow this thing up. So I'm pretty sure there was pushback on, yes, we do want to blow it up. But as the targeteer, I would be thinking, I want something formal. I'd be asking for, give me something formal.
Yeah.
Well, so that never happened. This is characterized, there was a series of frustrating miscommunications, missed phone calls, and lack of follow-up, which led to these doubts not being aired at a command level in time to stop the attack. He called, as a matter of fact, the same guy called while the bird was actually in the air to have the same conversation. You know, I'm not really sure. Why are you telling me this? Well, I just wanted you to know. Okay, so my second point. In the absence of command direction, the intelligence community will focus on process. And I would tell you, we've had this in the military as well, because the military intelligence is part of the intelligence community. I was in the Gulf War, and there was a big holdup in the Gulf War when we were fighting to kick Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait on battle damage assessment, because the staff had decided that there had to be a certain percentage of attrition of the Iraqi units before we would launch the ground war. So like this particular unit here, we want 50% of their tanks destroyed before we will consider attacking that by the air war, through the air campaign. Well, there was a focus on BDA numbers, but we never got there. We kept striking, but we kept not making the numbers, because you're looking at this tank, and it's sitting out there in the open, and that's the area you've been striking, but it's sitting there. But the only way to know it's destroyed, there's this little hole from where the round went in. And you can't see the little hole from your UAV or whatever, so you keep assessing it's still there. So these tanks are still there. They're destroyed, but they're still there. And that finally got circumvented by some high-level intelligence person saying, oh, no, come on now. If you've struck it, and you know you've struck it, then you've destroyed it.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of the same issue that's going on right now with questioning Iran about, we had these bunker buster bombs. And then somebody at DIA released a report saying, well, we don't think we really destroyed these targets, these nuclear targets. Well, you see the pictures, you've got a little hole. But if you're sure that's where the bunker was, and you know the effects of your bomb, your bunker buster bomb, that's all you're going to see. So if it's the right place and you see the hole, the assumption I would make is, I blew the heck out of that thing.
Yeah, seemed logical.
Yeah, but if if you're not focusing, then you'll come out and say, well, we really don't know that we did what we said we were going to do.
And it's going to take a long time before they can get down into underground because of all the destruction for the entrances and exits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what happens when we lose focus, when there's a lack of accountability, that you're doing something for a specific purpose. And that's where I'd say, these intelligence community directives are available on the internet. I mean, you can go read them. referencing Intelligence Community Directive 203 analytic standards, which is one of my favorite things. It's all process. And you will read a national intelligence estimate and you will see a footnote saying, well, CIA assesses this with a 40% probability. And DIA looks at it with an 80% probability. And then NSA says this, and these people say that, and everything like that. Well, there's a table. You're required to use certain terms for expressions of likelihood or probability. An analytic product must use one of the following sets of terms. And you've got a little graph. So you choose one from either row 1, or row 2, or row 3, but not both in the same product. So you can say, it's unlikely that this is going to happen. Or you can say there's a 20 to 45% probability that it's going to happen, but you can't say both. And once you say unlikely for one action, you have to choose another term from that same row for another action. You have to say roughly, even chance, likely, very likely, or almost certainly. But you can't use a number if you didn't start off with a number.
Okay.
Okay. And so just trying to figure out how to do this is using up all your time.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we think it's bad now, wait until we get artificial intelligence.
Why?
Well, one of the things I noted, and I was chastised on occasion for not being a team player, is that we don't think through the system the whole way. For example, I was the first unit to field the Army's new flagship intelligence system, something called the All-Source Analysis System, ASAS. And so we got brand new vans and brand new computers and brand new software. And we got a generator. Now, when you're in the field, when you're moving, you're attacking, you're defending, you're moving around, you have to generate your own electrical power to power all these computers and all this. Well, this new system, all these computers, these trucks, they come with one generator. Now there's a little bit of a problem there. If you're used to running generators, you have to occasionally shut it off so you can refuel it. And then you have to clean things and you have to do maintenance and all this sort of thing. Well, we had to shut down all the computers a half hour before we were going to turn off the power. Then you had to turn off the power. Then you had to service the generator, refuel it, that's about an hour. And then after you start it up again, it's another hour to reboot all the computers. So you got there, 2.5 hours, 2.5, 3 hours.
And how often do you have to do this?
Daily. Okay. So now here we are, we've got a commander who's fighting a battle 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, say in the Gulf War. And he's advanced, he wants intelligence on what the enemy is doing 24 hours out of the day. So the fielding team, I turned to the fielding team and said, well, here's the scenario. You've given me one generator to replace my old generator set that had 2 generators with a magic box in between where you just turn the switch and you switch power from where the power is coming from. Then you take down the one that's been running.
Yeah, service it.
Yeah. Well, the contractor requirement was for 20 hours a day to operate. And I said, the scenario is I will go stand in front of my Major General Division Commander. And I'll explain to him, sir, you got to stop the war for 4 hours a day because I can't give you intel for all 24 hours.
Probably didn't go over very well.
No, I never was stupid enough to go do that because the answer would have been, really, Colonel? Guess what? Go away, I'm going to get myself a new colonel. Yeah. So I fixed it. The way I fixed it was I turned to my non-commissioned officers and said, hey guys, I need a twin generator set. And here, you can have this one. And the fielding team was very unhappy with me because this was a brand new, quiet generator. It was the very latest technology. You can't give that away. That's part of this. Yes, I can, because I need uninterrupted power. Well, they had lost focus.
Yeah.
And, this was intelligence people driving this thing. Why do you think we're doing this? We're doing it to support the commander.
Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, no. And you see all that sort of thing going on all the time. And it's lack of accountability. Also,
a penny false savings too, right? I'm sure one generator costs less than 2.
Probably.
Yeah.
This was a brand new, beautiful thing. I mean, it was way overpowered for what I needed
for 20
it for.
hours.
It was a gorgeous generator. I hated to see that thing go. But
could you have scrounged up another one like it?
No, because you had to have, if your line authorization is for a generator set, then you have a generator set.
Okay.
Yeah. And otherwise, the Inspector General will find out and they'll do bad things.
So this whole intelligence and who's making it in the process versus the commander. Bringing us up to today's world on the new campaign in the Caribbean and Pacific to interdict boats, I guess, coming out of Colombia and Venezuela carrying drugs. How confident are you that the intelligence is correct on this one versus the intelligence that was collected on Iraq's germ warfare?
Well, the famous mass destruction weapons in Iraq that weren't there under Saddam Hussein, yeah. Well, let me talk to the Caribbean. I think it's probably very, very good intelligence that's going on. I think that they are hitting the kinds of targets they're looking for and intending to do that. And I say that based upon the fact that way back in the day, the drug war became Southern Command's big mission, and I was the South American branch chief, intelligence branch chief. And I got reoriented very quickly after our commander-in-chief South had his career ended early, because he was pointing out that the big issue in the drug war was not the supply problem, it's the demand problem. But nevertheless, well, then interdiction became the big thing. So I was task organized over to stand up basically a tactical intelligence unit at the strategic headquarters, which was an interesting thing to do. But I was tracking things. There was big aircraft movement of cocaine back in the day. You'd have a flight of like 15 big old Piper Navajo, Piper Aztec twin-engine commercial aircraft flying about a half metric ton of pure refined cocaine hydrochloride at each aircraft. So you'd watch them, and we could do amazing things because we got a whole pile of money.
Yeah.
So, we would get a tip that they're going to fly a drug flight out of Colombia. So you'd station a Navy AWACS type aircraft off of the Colombian west coast in international waters. And you'd watch the aircraft come over the Sierra Occidental, and then you'd track them. And when they got up there on the west coast of Central America near Panama, we'd fly F-16 fighter planes out of Howard, and they'd fly over and they'd write down the tail numbers of the aircraft. We'd call DEA and say, hey, we got these tail numbers. And they'd say, yeah, those are known traffickers. We'd watch them. We'd watch them fly all the way up to their northern Mexico airstrips. And we'd watch them offload. The Customs Service had an ability to take pictures of these aircraft. And you'd watch them load onto trucks and watch it taken off into the storage areas in northern Mexico. So we knew.
Did the Mexican government know?
Yes. Who exactly? No, I don't know. But we had a target analysis team in the U.S. Embassy from Southern Command, an officer and some NCOs. And they were on my high-frequency radio net, and they were briefing the ambassador, and they were briefing the DEA guy, and briefing the FBI, and briefing everybody in the embassy. And then I have reasonable assurance that this was communicated by those people in the embassy directly to the government, that it's moving, they're moving, there's 15 airplanes, here's where they are. And I would get beaten practically senseless, in a figurative sense, every morning, because I would be the first lead-off briefer in the Sync South's daily briefing. And the four-star general, I'd be the first guy to stand up. And I would say, sir, last night, there were 15 drug-carrying aircraft. They started here, they're here, here's a picture, here's the tail number, here's the, here. He would break into every other sentence and say, who did you tell? Well, I told the J3 operations people, I told the embassies, I told Forces Command, I told the DEA, and I gave them regular updates, and here they are, here they go. So the only thing that was different between that and the Caribbean now is that we didn't have the ability to say, okay, F-16 driver, all these aircraft that you're looking at, we're sure these are drug-carrying aircraft. You flip that little button and you have weapons free. If that was happening now, I'm sure that's what would happen.
Yeah.
So I'm reasonably confident. Oh, let me see. What is my correct analytical term? I think it is highly probable, and or 80 to 95%, that yes, we know with a good level of detail that these are drug operations underway. And this will be fine until we lose focus.
Until Murphy's Law.
Well, yeah, until we blow up the Chinese embassy.
Oh.
You know, we flew 900 targets, everything was fine, and then we blew up the Chinese embassy.
Yeah.
So is something going to happen? Yeah. Somebody with some competing interest is going to try to have mission creep here. And so you're going to start hitting targets that you have less amount of certainty. And if we do that, then we're going to have a Chinese embassy kind of moment.
Do you think the U.S. government is correct legally and morally blowing these boats up out of the water?
We did not feel at the time that I was in Southern Command that we had that authority. The SINC did not believe he had that authority.
Yeah.
The administration did not believe we had that authority. And that's my own knowledge of it.
Okay. Fair enough.
And the reason why I would say that this is, we just have to be very certain that we keep up the level of intelligence on this, and that we do not lose focus, and that we do not change the standards.
Well, I can see down the road where the government, our legislature, Congress, has a different body of people, say 5 years from now, and they say, this was immoral and illegal what the U.S. military was doing, blowing these boats out of the water, and we're going to take these guys before us and we're going to talk to them.
I've heard many times legal analysts saying that we're doing something wrong. I remember, well, we were talking about something entirely different, but I remember when Congress was passing a law to recoup funds paid to AIG during you remember when we had the big mortgage balloon blow up back at the very end of the George W. Bush administration,
yes,
just before President Obama coming in. There were organizations, companies that were too big to fail. And we bailed out Chrysler, we bailed out General Motors, we bailed out a number of the Wall Street people, and we bailed out AIG. Well, AIG turned around, and the first thing they did with the money, the hundreds of millions that the taxpayer bailed them out with, was to pay themselves the executive bonuses for the big guys that they hadn't been able to pay for the last couple of years because they were basically bankrupting their company. Well, Congress immediately decided we're going to claw back that money. And there were legal analysts throughout the world saying, well, you can't do that because you're passing an ex post facto law that's singling out just one of these companies that you bailed out, and the others are doing the same sort of thing. So what you've got, an ex post facto law that's also a bill of attainder, both strictly prohibited by the Constitution, the basic law. So when you sign up to pass that law in Congress, you are basically violating the Constitution. Is anybody going to go back and revisit that?
And one of your theories then would be that this might be the beginning of the end as far as the American Republic is concerned, that it's a sort of a post in the decline of American Republic?
Well, I think any time where you're able to say that the great majority of the American people's elected representatives at the federal level consciously, willingly broke their oaths of office to pass unconstitutional measures that are clearly on the face of it, and there are lots of legal analysts you could look up from the time, that's a watershed event. Now, and there are other things, there are actions that are questionable. For example, we decided the executive decided that we were going to launch a Hellfire missile and kill a person named Anwar al-Awlaki under President Obama's administration, an American citizen by birth, and he was an agitator and advocating the overthrow of the United States government, and he was an Islamist, and he was hanging out in Yemen doing podcasts talking about the Muslims should overthrow the United States government. So he got blown up. There are amendments to the United States Constitution that say words, pretty explicit words like, you cannot undertake criminal actions against a United States citizen unless by presentation to a grand jury. In other words, unless the judiciary is involved.
Yeah.
The judiciary was never involved, and a United States citizen was executed.
Well, I think the argument the administration used was we're at war, right?
Sure.
War and terror.
Sure.
Yeah.
But a United States citizen
Yeah.
who was in full possession of all his guaranteed civil rights.
Yeah.
No trial by jury, no judiciary involvement.
Yeah. Okay.
How many more cans of worms shall we open?
I know. Okay. Well, I think our time is running out. Do you have any closing thoughts on intelligence and the future? Let's talk about the future for a few minutes. I mean, where are we heading as far as this war on drugs? And I'm a firm believer that the general that got sort of canned was right. It's a demand problem, not so much a supply problem, because if there's a buck to be made, somebody will figure out a way to make a buck. Mm-hmm. Whereas demand is driving all this illegal activity because Americans are consuming these drugs, and it's corrupting the whole social fabric. So I guess the real answer is that there has to be a change in the American culture to make drugs less inviting to the population.
Well, I think the big question would be, why do we now have a society where violence, unlawful taking of drugs, all of these types of behaviors are viewed as common and in some cases appropriate? Well, what has happened in the society?
What has?
We have a culture now that does not expect individual responsibility to play a part in people's actions.
We can now go down a road of Marxist philosophy of no individual, it's the environment versus the individual responsibility.
Sure, it's corporate responsibility.
Yeah, it's someone else's. And that's the whole difference between the Judeo-Christian civilization of individual responsibility versus the totalitarian ideology of communism and Islamism, where the government exists for the individual in capitalism. The individual exists for the government in Marxism and Islamism. There's the major difference. And I think one of the watershed, and again, we're not going to go down there, I'm just spouting off here. I think it really culminates back in the late 60s when the welfare system encouraged out of wedlock births and legalized or legitimized abortions. The whole concept of the value of a human being was terminated. And from that basic foundation of devaluating the value of a human being, all this other stuff. I mean, people were celebrating the murder of a healthcare executive. People were celebrating October 7th, the slaughter and rape and pillage of 1,200 Israelis. It's not within my frame of good behavior.
Well, and you touched on, I think, the key point that if the system does not believe that every individual life has value, then you're heading in the wrong direction. And we are basically at that point now.
Yeah, I agree.
And we're at a point where I just saw a recent poll saying 46% of a group decided that it's appropriate to use violence against your political adversaries.
Yeah, and to shut them down. And
yeah, your individual adversary does not have any individual value, so you can treat him as an object, not as a person.
Celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that pleasant note,
yes, sir.
I think I'm going to say thank you very much. It was most enlightening.
Well, thank you, sir.
And again, thank you. We appreciate your participation with us in the American Security Council Foundation Peace Through Strength podcast series. Please review us on www.ascf.us. Thank you.